Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Moed Kattan, Daf Yomi, and we're starting right at the top of the page. If you look just back at the last three words of the bottom of the previous page, it said Adam Chashuv Shiny. There was a distinction of something that was mutter, but that someone who was chashuv, and not that they were Bali Gaiva, God forbid, but they knew that their role in the community was a role of chashivus, and they therefore had an achrayus and a responsibility to the tzibur. So therefore, they were more makbid on themselves. We'll see a number of cases like that today, where the answer of the Gemara is Adam Chashuv Shiny. Let's get started. Top of Yud Beis Amud Aleph. Just one housekeeping note for this week. Baruch Hashem, this coming Shabbos, Amir Hashem is my son's bar mitzvah, which is great. Mazel tov. And because of that, I'm not going to be giving Daf Yomi on Shabbos. A lot of family coming in. What we'll be doing is a blot and a half tomorrow night, a blot and a half the next night. That's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, one blot, Friday morning, one blot, and then we're covered. I think that actually works. So I'll keep you all posted as things come up. I'll post in the group as well. Let's get started. Amar Shmuel, Mekable Kiboles. If you have someone who is salaried, this is a very important distinction. You have someone who you are paying an amount of money to get a job done. It is not clocked per se. It is a project-oriented salary. So you've hired a non-Jew. That's what Rashi points out. So says the Gemara as follows. If they're doing work for you within the Tchum Shabbos, that's asur. If, however, this salaried non-Jewish employee is doing work for you outside of the Tchum, that's mutter, no problem at all. But here are a couple of qualifications. Amar Rav Papa, even if you are outside of the tchum, it's not always mutter. Lo amran ela deleka amata demekarva lahasam. That's only true when there isn't another city that's close to there. Okay, so you're in West Rogers Park. So your non-Jewish guy goes over to Lincolnwood, but that's not far enough because you're close enough to another city. When there is a city, that's not allowed. Yet another qualification, Yud Beis Amud Aleph, 5 lines down, Amar of Masharshia, and even if you have a city that isn't near other cities, Nami, still we have the following guidelines. Lo amran ela b'shabbasos of yamim tovim. That's only true on Shabbos and Yom Tov. The lo shchichi in sheda azle lahasam, where traveling is a little bit more difficult. We have Tchum Shabbos issues, and we have carrying on Shabbos, v'chulei. Aval, and this is where we tie back into our sugyas of Chol HaMoed. Aval b'chulo shel Moed shchiche inshei to azle va'asu lahasam aser. So if you have a non-Jew, this is effectively amir la'akum as an iser, even on Chol HaMoed. Unbelievable idea. So that's what the Gemara says, that on Chol HaMoed. Marasayin is a part of this discussion as well. But when we're talking about this idea of Mekable Kiboles, so that's what Rashi on the top of the page says. That if you look at the top Rashi, he says, everybody knows that, that he gave it to him to do on Shabbos. And the end of that Rashi speaks about this idea about chashad and whether or not it's minkar. So it's a blend of issues. Yes, it is. It does seem to be very similar, overlaying halachos of the chashad that Rashi speaks about and the typical amir la'akum that we know about. It doesn't look from that you have someone doing work for you on Shabbos. A story. Marzutra Breder of Nachman, Banule Apadna Mikable Kiboles Chutz l'tchum. He had people who were building a mansion for him outside of the tchum. And then Ikla Rav Safra, Rav Huna Bar Chinana, Velo Alu Legabe. These two rabbis came to meet with Marzutra, but they weren't willing to go in the house. And not only were they not willing to go in the house, Vika de Amre, some say, Hu Nami Lo Al Begabe. He himself didn't go into the house. So says the Gemara, why would that be? It should be the case that if you're outside of the tchum, that is totally permissible. So why wouldn't these three greats go into the house? I don't understand. So says the Gemara, Adam Chashav Shiny. You have to know when to be above the fray. And that's not simple. As Jews in general, we always have to be above the fray. You could be the most simple Orthodox Jew. You're not a Talmud Chacham, you're not Haaretz, but you wear a kippah and tzitzis, you don tefillin and talis in the morning. Guess what? Klape chutz, you're a Talmud Chacham. Doesn't matter. Adam Chashav Shiny. And we have to make sure that when we are in a position of influence, that we make the right decisions. V'ika de Amre, some say that the reason why they wouldn't go in wasn't because of Adam Chashav Shiny, rather siuye Saya betivna bahadaihu. Mar Zutra actually helped them with some of the bricks, with some of the things that were going on, and it made it appear as though he was part of the process, and that would be problematic. Rav Chama shara lehu le'avungri debei resh galusa le'me'avad lehu avidita v'chula demoada. The avungri were people who made tables for a living. So they were allowed to do the building of the table in the home of the Reish Galusa and Chol HaMoed. Omar, Kevan de Agra lo kashakle. They're not actually taking money as payment, but instead, sharshuyehu de kamesharshule. They were getting other benefits instead of food. The leslanba, that's no big deal. What's sharshuyehu de kamesharshule? So Rashi says about 20 lines down in the Rashi, revach be'alma k'dei seudas, and they got the value of a meal. To ka'achle behadayu v'lo kachashiv malacha, and therefore it's fine. That's not problematic. So you can barter instead of pay, and that lessens the concerns. Next, third of the way down. Tanu Rabbanan, Mekablan kiboles b'moed. You're allowed to hire someone at a fixed salary on moed la'asos la'achar hamoed, to do the work after the moed. Ubemoed, but to do the work itself on the moed, that's not allowed. Also, klal shel davar. Here's a general rule: kol shehu oseh omer lenachri v'oseh. Anything that you're allowed to do yourself, you're certainly allowed to ask a non-Jew to do. V'chol she'eino oseh eino omer lenachri v'oseh. And the same, of course, would be true for anything you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to ask a non-Jew. Another brisa of a similar tone: Tanya idach mekablan kiboles b'moed la'asos la'achar hamoed ubilvad shelo yimdod v'shelo yishkol v'shelo yimane kederach she'oseh b'chol. You can hire them to do the work later, but you can't get into all the nitty gritty. So I'm going to give you $20 by Venmo and $15 by credit card. We're not getting into the details. I just want you to do some work for me after Chol HaMoed. We're not discussing the details now. Halfway down, 7 lines before the wide lines. Tanu Rabbanan, Ein marbin behema v'chulo shel moed. We do not breed animals on Chol HaMoed. It's considered to be tircha. Kayotze both similarly, ein marbin bechor. The same by bechor. It's same with it's true with an animal that's a bechor. Below b'psule hamukdash, and with animals that became puzzle from being in the Beis Hamikdash. None of these animals can be bred on Chol HaMoed. Tanya idach, another brisa, ein marbin behema b'chulo shel moed. Same din. However, Yehuda Omer chamora shetava. If you have a chamora, a female donkey that is interested in procreating, then then instead of the concern of her being less interested in the future in breeding, so therefore it's considered to be fine now, that she should not cool off from her current desires, which makes it more difficult to breed. When it comes to all other animals, it's very simple. Put them in the pen, let nature take its course, and they will conceive in due time. First of the very long lines, Tanu Rabbanan, you're not allowed to fertilize ground during these 3 types of holidays, Shabbos, Yom Tov, and Chol HaMoed. Here, we're not talking about taking fertilizer from a bag and sprinkling it. We're talking about how they fertilized things back in the day, which is that they would concentrate animals into a certain area, feed them enough until they go to the bathroom, and then they fertilize the ground. That you're not allowed to do. It's considered a tircha. Not on any of these days. Of course. If it happens on its own, and it happened to be the field that needed fertilizing, great, good for you. Mutter, no problem at all. We do not, if these are being run by non-Jews, we don't help the non-Jews in what they're doing, even if it's for us. We don't give them any helpers from who are Jewish. However, if this non-Jew who was hired was either hired for a week, for a month, for a year, or for the Shemitah cycle, so for the whole year, for the whole 7 years, then then they can get an assistant. There is someone who can help them. However, Rebbe doesn't agree. Rabbi Omer, you can't pay them. It has to be b'Shabbos. If it's on Shabbos, then b'Tova, we pay them back with a favor of some kind, bartering. B'Yom Tov b'Mazonos, and Yom Tov we give them food. B'Moed b'Schar, on Moed we do give them schar. We do give them some actual funds. And Amar of Yosef Hilchasa Rebbe, that there are times that we do allow for a non-Jew who is managing your field. There are times that we do assist him in the process of ensuring that the field does get fertilized. That brings us to a new Mishnah. But before we speak about the new Mishnah, let's look back at the Mishnah at the very top of the previous Amud Yud Aleph Amud Beis. We had said there was a case of someone who was preparing to make olives, and then the person unfortunately went into Avelos, or something else happened. And then the next Mishnah says the following: someone who's preparing wine, and in the process of building out the wine, of making the wine, Nebuch, he became an Avel, which has nothing to do with Chol HaMoed, as we discussed yesterday. Or perhaps One, something unfortunate happened that was out of his control, Sheitu, or the the workers never showed up. So then when it comes to the wine, the Mishnah says, Zole v'gomer v'gaf kedarko divrei Rabbi Yossi l'shitaso, holds that when it comes to davar ha'aved, we pull out all the stops. You can do any malacha that you want, no problem. You can even put it in a barrel and close it kedarko divrei Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, you're not allowed to do this because it's chol hamoed and it's not allowed. Osa lo limudim, you take these special kind of boards to cover over the wine, bishvil shelo yachmid, so that it doesn't spoil and become like the bad flavor of wine after it ages a little bit too long. Firstly, the Gemara is bothered by the fact that we have two Mishnayos that are almost identical. You have olive oil, the person goes into Avelis, what can you do? You have wine, the person goes into Avelis, what can you do? Why both? Come on, real estate is everything when it comes to Jewish law. So it says the Gemara Vitzricha. And this Vitzricha is explained by the Gemara, by Rashi, which is just to the right of where we are, the first Rashi in the new section of Gemara. Vitzricha lememer betarvaihu b'shnei bave demasnisin demishcha udechamra. Both sections of the Mishnah, the previous one, which was mishcha, which was oil, and this one was udechamra, we need to explain both. Why is that? Diashminan kamaisa. If I only had the Mishnah on the top of Yud Aleph Amud Beis at the open of Parak Mishahafach, if I only had the one that talked about oil, so then Rabbi Yossi bishum the Mishcha nafish pside. Rabbi Yossi, that's only there is he saying that the davar ha'aved doesn't need a shinui because the oil is very expensive. It's very difficult to extract good olive oil. Aval, maybe had it been that there was only that Mishnah, I could have inferred from the fact that we only spoke about that chamra delo nafish psida ema modu leila Rabbi Yehuda, that when it comes to wine, which really isn't such a you can make it back relatively easily. There's lots of grapes. So then there he might have assumed that he agreed with Rabbi Yehuda to be machmir, and that's not correct. So therefore we needed this Mishnah. And if we had this Mishnah which speaks about wine, maybe Rabbi Yehuda. Only there was Rabbi Yehuda strict about davar ha'aved. But maybe aval behach, when it comes to the oil, ema modu le Rabbi Yossi, maybe he'd agree that there needs to be, we pull out all the stops, and even Rabbi Yehuda would agree to Rabbi Yossi when it comes to the mishcha, to the oil, that we are going to be totally lenient, and that's not true either. Therefore, tzricha, we need both cases because otherwise we would have had a misunderstanding of Rabbi Yossi in regards to the case of the Mishnah about wine, and we would have misunderstood Rabbi Yehuda in regards to the Mishnah about oil. So therefore, we had both of them. 15 lines or so from the bottom. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Abba. How do we paskin? Man tana shinui b'moed b'davar ha'aved. Who is the one who says that we have a shinui when it comes to doing a davar ha'aved, an activity, a malacha, to prevent a loss? So whose sheet says that? The loka Rabbi Yossi. That's not Rabbi Yossi. Remember, we said Rabbi Yossi is the one where we pull out all the stops. Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef says, halacha l'maisa, how do we paskin halacha ki Rabbi Yossi, that when it comes to a davar ha'aved, there is no shinui. Straight up, you are allowed to do a davar ha'aved, you're allowed to do malacha straight up. The whole din of the malacha doesn't apply in the case of davar ha'aved. Very good. Bo Minei, says the Gemara, 12 lines or so from the bottom. Bo Minei me Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Ma'u lemesha chavisa de shiur b'chula de moada. What is the halacha about sealing a barrel of beer on chol hamoed? So sealing the barrels is a big deal. Otherwise, it spills. It gets too much oxygen. We need to make sure that they're sealed nice. And the misha means to seal. Fine. Omar lehu, he says to him, Sinai Omar halacha ki Rabbi Yossi. Why are you asking that? Sinai told us that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. Who's Sinai? Sinai, says Rashi and says Rav Dani, is Rabbi Yosef. That's the nickname he got in the Beis Medrash. Oh, you don't know the answer to the question? Go ask Sinai, the guy who knows everything that was taught at Har Sinai. And over time, you say a name enough times, it becomes a person's nickname. That was taka true. What about all the previous Gemaras that we learned about nicknames? So clearly this isn't a negative one. Obviously, it has to be Mutzer. The Gemara calls him Sinai. And if you look in the Masoras Hashas, we saw this a very long time ago, about 700 blot ago, almost exactly 700 blot ago. Today is blot 751 of Shas. So we're plowing through. I was going to make a whole thing last night, but we weren't in person, so fine. 751 blot, Baruch Hashem. So says the Gemara, what do you mean? Well, of course you can seal the barrel. After all, we paskin like Sinai, we paskin like Rabbi Yossi, who says that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi. What does Rabbi Yossi hold? He holds that we pull out all the stops when it comes to davar ha'aved. There is no shinui. So says the Gemara, well, hold on one second. I could understand what's going on in regards to wine. I could understand the sealings of the barrels over there. But says the Gemara, why is it that by wine it was pasha to him that that the barrel should be sealed? So here the Gemara seems to flip-flop. The Gemara seemed to say earlier that there's a bigger hefsid in oil than there is. That's not really a flip-flop. It's just, I guess, a different comparison. That was comparing oil to wine. This is comparing wine to beer. Right, that's correct. So I take my comment back. Says the Gemara, Chamra time of mai. Why is it that by wine it's obvious to us that you can seal a barrel mishum the nafish pseida, because that has a very high market value. We don't want it to ruin it. It needs to seal. Shechranami, when it comes to beer, says the Gemara, same thing. Yisbe pseida. That's why Rabbi Yossi. That's why the Gemara says in the name of Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, his question is answered. You should be able to cover it. To Amar. The Amar Abaye says, Omer li aim. This phrase is found dozens of times throughout Shas. At least we've learned it many times so far. My mother told me. Although, of course, we know it's not his mother. His mother died in childbirth. This was the caretaker who raised him. Amar li aim, barshis save v'shia mi bar tamne veloshia. I'd rather have 6 sa of wine that's sealed in a barrel than 8 that isn't sealed in a barrel. The ratios are interesting. A 25% difference from 8 to 6. Okay, what if it would have been 9? Maybe he would have preferred it. The Gemara doesn't say. I have a feeling it's more tongue-in-cheek. It might have just been the parlance of the day. We have this phrase where we say 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. It could have just been one of those phrases, but why does it say 6 versus 8? Don't know. Amar Rav Chama bar Guria Amar Rav. Hilchos Moed ki Hilchos Kusim behalacha. Hilchos Moed is very similar to the halachos of the Kusim. So the Rishonim here explain, Rashi discusses this as well, that the Kusim were a group of people that when they kept something, they kept it well. So what does this mean? It was Lamai Hilchos. What type of comparison are we making between the halachos of Chol HaMoed and the world of Kusim? Amar of Daniel bar Katina lomar shehein akuros ve'ein lemedos zomizom. That just like in regards to the Kusim, that yes, they may keep an area of halacha very well, but you can learn nothing from them because they only keep whatever they keep. They're not Talmidei Chachamim, they're not Bnei Torah. So too by the halachos of Chol HaMoed, you cannot expand from one to the other. Chol HaMoed is a very unique set of halachos, and we cannot expand it to others. That's why it's similar to the Kusim. The Amar Shmuel says 3 lines from the bottom. Zoftin kuzta. Ve'ein zoftin chavisa. We are allowed to put pitch in a jug, but we're not allowed to put pitch in a barrel. Speaking about Chol HaMoed, Rav Dimi min Harda Amar the opposite, zoftin chavisa, that you're allowed to put pitch in a barrel, ve'ein zoftin kusta, and you're not allowed to put pitch into a jug. Mar chayish lebseida, umar chayish letircha. The distinction between these two things is one person is worried about pseida, and the other person is worried about tircha. The one who's worried about pseida, about losing a good amount of food, is going to take the barrel, a lot more food in a barrel than in a pitcher. The one who's concerned about tircha will allow for the pitch to be put inside of a pitcher to waterproof it so that you don't lose the pitcher. But we're worried about tircha, so you can't do the whole barrel. And these halachos cannot be expanded to other areas of halacha. Thus, the comparison between Chol HaMoed to Kusim. Last line. Amar Abai naktin on halachos hilchos Moed ki hilchos Shabbos. We actually have a comparison between hilchos Moed to the laws of Shabbos. How so? As we turn to the top of Yud Beis and Yud Beis, we'll be going to the Mishnah toward the bottom of the page. Let's continue. Yesh mehen pater avalaser, yesh mehen muter lechatchila. That they're just like on Shabbos, we have halachos that are pater avalaser, nitzer derabanan, and sometimes things are muter. The same is true on Chol HaMoed. Rashi details an example of this. Let's continue. Rav Huna chatztu lechatzta b'mada. Rav Huna cut down some of the grains from his grain field on Chol HaMoed. Esve Rabbi bar Rav Huna the Rav Huna. So the son of Rav Huna asked Rav Huna, tochnen kemach b'moed letzorach hamoed. You can grind flour on Chol HaMoed for the sake of the moed. V'shelo letzorach hamoed aser. But if it's not going to be for the tzorach of the moed, then that's not allowed. As well, davar she'avud b'moed muter la'asos b'moed. And if you have something that is davar ha'avud b'moed, then you have an opportunity that will be lost. Then you are allowed to do that activity. Davar she'eino avud b'moed. If you have an activity that you'll do which doesn't have an issue of davar ha'aved attached to it, aser, it's not allowed. But medvar mamur. When is it that we say that we're allowed to grind these grains? B'talush min karka. That's only true if they're already pre-cut from the ground. You have a barrel of whatever, barley or wheat, whatever it is, but it hasn't been ground yet. It's been plucked, but it hasn't been ground. So that's when it's b'talush. Aval mechubar lekarka afilu kula avud aser. Even if everything is going to be lost, it doesn't matter. That's not a malacha that we allow to be done on Chol HaMoed. If a person doesn't have any food at all, so then what do we do? Kotzer u'me'amer v'dash v'zoru borer v'tochen u'belvad shelo yidosh beparos. So then we have to do it with a shinui. You can do the tochen, you can do the dash zoru borer v'tochen, but what you cannot do is you can't use paros, you can't use cows to pull the harvesting machines, to pull the blades. So says the Gemara, that's a stira. It seems to be that you should not be allowed to do this like you regularly did. Look at the second line of the page. Rav Huna chatztu lechasta b'moada. He said that you're allowed to do this. This brisa says you're not. Amar le yichida ahi. The brisa that you just quoted, The brisa that you just quoted is a brisa that's a das yachid. Below svirlan kavase, and we don't hold like this brisa. What does this brisa say? The Tanya. The brisa says, last short line, Yud Beis and Mid Beis. Klal Amarad Shimon ben Gamliel Mishum Rabbi Yossi. Davar hatalush min akarka afilu miktsaso avud mutter. If you have grains that are already cut from the ground, then even if there's going to be a small amount of aveda, small amount of lost value or lost item, lost food, mutter, no problem. So we see that Rabbi Yossi is very, very makbid here in this particular case, which is unique because normally he pulls out all the stops. He's our guy for davar avid, but doesn't apply when it's mechubar lekarka. This is the das yachid. But the Gemara says, I'm not sure that the initial shita was like Rabbi Yossi. We had said in the first brisa that asked the question on Rav Huna, that brisa said that you're not allowed to have paros, you're not allowed to have cows pull the devices that harvest the ground. The Rabbi Yossi, I don't understand. Yadush nami beparos. If he's going to allow it at all, it's going to be with paros because Ha'amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abba mantana shinui b'moed b'davar ha'aved. Who says that there is a shinui? That's not Rabbi Yossi. The loka Rabbi Yossi. So therefore, how can we even say that this first brisa is talking about Rabbi Yossi? The Gemara responds 4 lines into the wide lines. Amar lach hachinami kevan de kol yom alad beparos daishi. Because normally when we're doing the harvesting, it's not done by pulling. It's not done by the pulling of a cow. Maybe they use a sickle. I don't know exactly what they did, but it wasn't done with a cow. Nanami lav shinui. That's not considered to be something that's a normal intervention. Next, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis have taught us, as we already saw, tochanan b'moed l'tzorach hamoed. You can grind on chol hamoed for the sake of the moed. V'shelo l'tzorach hamoed aser. But to do so for afterward is not allowed. If you ground up some flour, you meant to grind up 5 pounds worth of flour, you grinding up 6. No problem. You're allowed to use that even afterwards. You can cut trees for the sake of the chol hamoed, but not for afterwards. You're not allowed to do that afterwards. But being katat, so hosir. In kitzeis v'hosir, if you have cut and there were some leftovers, no problem. I raise them mutter, no problem. Matil and sheichar b'moed l'tzorach hamoed. You're allowed to make beer for chol hamoed on chol hamoed. V'shelo l'tzorach hamoed aser, but you cannot make beer on chol hamoed for afterwards. V'im hitel v'hosir ha raise them mutter. Ubilvan shelo yar. If you have extra beer, you wanted to make 1 keg, you ended up making a keg and a half. No problem. Nobody minds. Ubilvan shelo yarim. Provided that you don't intentionally work the system. Oh, I'm going to make beer. In the back of your mind, you're like, and it'll last for the next couple of weeks also. So the brisa says you're not allowed. Asks the Gemara a third of the way down. That's not true. Or minhu, we have a brisa. Matil and sheichar b'moed l'tzorach hamoed, v'shelo l'tzorach hamoed aser. Regular rules, like we saw, you're allowed to make beer, but you're not allowed to make it for afterwards. Echad sheichar tomorrow, echad sheichar seorim. That's true if it's going to be date beer, and it's true if it's going to be barley beer. V'afal pishi yesh lo yashan. Even if he has beer already in his cellar, so says the Gemara, me'arim v'shosa min achadash. You're still allowed to make new beer that you plan to drink, and you can be ma'arim and drink from the new one, even though you only drank very little and you plan to keep the rest of the stash for later, no problem. So that's a stira in brisa. One brisa seems to say that we allow the ha'arama, that's the newer brisa, and the previous brisa seems to say you're not allowed to do the ha'arama. Answers the Gemara halfway down, Tanoi. You're right, it's a machlokas tanaim, the Tanya, ein ma'arimin bekach, and Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer ma'arimin. So just a fundamental machlokas. Do we allow for the ha'arama on chol hamoed, yes or no? And that is the subject of the discussion here in the last couple of brises. Rav had cut down some grains on chol hamoed. Shama Shmuel heard about it. Ikbid, he was very upset. What is Rav doing? How could he cut grains down on chol hamoed? That's not allowed. So says the Gemara, Lema Shmuel ki yechidas virle. Maybe Shmuel is like that brisa that we saw previously on the page, the one that says that you're not allowed to cut down the grains, even though Rav seemed to say that it was mutter. Says the Gemara, Lo charta dechite havale de lo hava pasid. What Rav was cutting down was flour. And flour lasts a very long time. There wouldn't be no hefsid if you waited until after the Chag. The Rav, my time avid hachi. Okay, then the question gets thrown back to Rav. If Shmuel is right that wheat has no davar ha'avid, no hefsid at all, then don't do it on chol hamoed. Just wait a few days. And the kasha is back on Rav. Why would you allow it? Says the Gemara, Ein lo ma yochal hava. He was in a state of having no food, so therefore he was allowed to cut it. Shmuel lo saimu akame. Shmuel didn't hear this detail of the story. When you ask a shiloh, you have to give all the parameters.
It's hard to hear. Rav was a big rabbi.
Rav was a very big rabbi. What was your question?
So how can he have nothing to eat? He was going to be able to be nothing to eat.
What's the big rabbi have to do with that? He's poor.
No, I don't think he was poor. I think history shows that he wasn't poor.
Oh, all right. I'll be Hasidish for a moment. He donated everything to the Yid across the street, and now he had no food.
I know that he donated. He might have entertained the first part of Yontif. He was exhausted.
Also possible. Whatever the case was, he had no food, and Shmuel didn't know about it. Inami, and back to where we started today, Adam Chashav Shiny, that Rav. The Rav is different, and Rav wasn't Adam Chashuv, or Shmuel wasn't Adam Chashuv. How did you learn this Gemara? I didn't even think about that till right now. Who is the Adam Chashuv? It has to be Shmuel.
No, why Shmuel?
Because Shmuel was the Machmir. Shmuel was the one who said, Rav, you're not allowed to do this. You're a Chashuv person.
Right, so then Rav would be a Chashuv.
Yeah, I'm saying it's Shmuel saying to Rav, it has to be about Chashivus. Even though you're poor, even though you have not poor, you have no food, you're a chashuv person. I don't care. You got to figure it out. Right. That's what the Gemara has to read. Next, halfway down, Rabbi Yehuda Nisia Nafak b'chumrasa dimedusha. This, I would never have translated these words this way, because I would have thought that chumrasa was a chamor. It's not. It's a signet ring made from wood. That's a chumrasa, is a signet ring. I don't know. Sometimes I find this in Shas that like words are used.
We can tell chamor whether it's chamor or chamor.
Right. Now chumrasa. So we have chamor, which is a donkey.
Right.
We have, or as Mark likes to say, a donkey. And then we have chamra, which is wine, and now we have chumrasa, which is a signet ring. Okay. Anyways, Rabbi Yehuda Nisia, this is the grandson of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, not to be confused. It's 2 generations later. So he went out with this signet ring, the ishti maya de achim kfela arma, and he drank water that was warmed up in an urn of a non-Jew. Shama Rav Ami and Ikbid. Rav Ami was upset when he heard about this. So Amar Rav Yosef, wait a minute, which part were you upset about? My time of Ikbid. Imishum chumrasad medusha. If what you were concerned about was the signet ring, that's not a problem. Tanya, shiur and hanazam and vatabos, all of these types of jewelry. That's totally allowed to be carried, no problem. A signet ring isn't a problem. And imishum de ishti maya de achim kvela arma. And if it's because he drank water that was warmed up in a container of a non-Jew, and you're concerned about bishul akum, ha'amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak amar Rav, kol shenechal kamos shehu chai, ein bo mishum bishul nachrim. That when you have water that's heated up by a guy, that's not a problem at all. You can walk into any coffee shop under the sun and ask for a cup of coffee. There's no bishul akum there. That for 2 reasons. And this is both halacha l'maisa. First of all, we have this din that anything that's nechal chai, let's say you eat red peppers. So I eat red peppers all the time. So you have a non-Jew, you have a guy who decides to make you stir fry, and no problem, you can eat the red peppers because it's nechal chai. Water for sure, alachas kama v'kama. That's number 1. And the second din is that anything that's not ola al shulchan malachim, any food that isn't considered chashuv, so that food is not subject to the rules of bishul akum. So Rabbi first told me that like making noodles for kids, we have someone in our house who's not Jewish. She watches our children. So she's allowed to make noodles. It's bishul akum. It's not bishul akum. Why? It's not nechal k'mos chai. We don't eat noodles raw. That's not normal. So Rabbi first said it's not ola al shulchan malachim. It's not a chashuv azach. It's not a chashuv of food. So no problem. A goy is allowed to make food for you without any involvement of a yid under these circumstances. If it's nechal k'mos chai, if it's eaten raw, or if it is not ola al shulchan malachim. So in this case, no problem at all. The water should have been fine. So if that's the case, what was Rav Ami so upset about? He didn't do anything wrong. Says the Gemara, Adam chashuv shiny. It's different. You got to be more careful. When you're on the upper echelon of the community, you got to be more careful, and you need to make sure that you're makbid seemingly on both things. But the Gemara is not clear from that. He should have been more careful. So that's what Rashi says over here. Rashi halfway down a little bit more. Dibra maskal Adam chashuv shiny. Yesh lo lahachmir al atzmo yoser. He should have been more strict on himself. Rashi says both things that he did were wrong. He should not have gone out with a signet ring because you're an Adam chashuv. He should not have relied on the leniency of the food by bishul nachrim is nechal k'mos shuchai. Okay, next, 2/3 of the way down, Amar Rav Chananel, Amar Rav Kotetz Adam Dekel b'Moed. A person can cut down a palm tree during Chol HaMoed. Afal pish eno tzarech ela l'nesoras shelo. Even if you only need the nesoras, even if you only need the dust, the sawdust of the tree from the cutting, no problem at all. Abai didn't like this. He cursed anyone who would follow that shita. Ravashi havale abba bishlanya. Here's another word that has multiple interpretations. What's abba? What would we have all thought? Rashi says it's a forest. So we have an Abba, Bishlanya. There was a forest in the city of Shalanya. And Azal, and he went to go cut down trees. Amar le Rav Shila, Bishlanya, the Rav Ashi. Rav Shila, who lived in that city, says to him, my daitech, the Ka'amar of Chananel, Amar Rav, you hold leniently that you're allowed to do this, but we know that halayat ala Abaye. How can you say that you're going to go cut down a tree? Abaye said that someone's cursed if they do that. So what did he say? Who was talking now? We're talking about a chashuv person. We're talking to Rav Ashi. Amar le lo shmieli. I did not hear this opinion. And the Gemara clarifies it doesn't mean he didn't hear this opinion. It says the Gemara, klomar lo svirli. I don't hold of him. So he picks up the hammer, he picks up the axe, says the Gemara, ishtamid narga, he picks up the axe and the head of the axe falls out, boil the mifsake, the shake, and it almost cut his thigh off. Says the Gemara, shavke v'hadar asa. He put the okay, thank you very much. I will be putting the axe down, no more cutting. I didn't mean to go against Abaye, and he walked away. It raises the great shaila of how do we interpret the hashgacha pratis that happens in our lives? When these things happen, are we allowed to say, absolutely, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is tapping me on the shoulder, a love tap? I'm sure we've all experienced many things like this. So that's what the Gemara says in this case, that he realized, Rav Ashi realized that he had made an error in not paskening like Abaye, and he changed his tune.
He interpreted the thigh tap.
Yeah, not a shoulder tap, but it's true. Absolutely. Says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda Shar Lemeakar Kitna, one is allowed to harvest flax or lemektal kshusa, which is hops that's used in beer. Lemekar shumshimi. Shumshimi, according to some Rishonim, is unclear what it is. It's some type of seed producing plant. And Omar Le, does the article translate shumshimi?
Yeah, sesame.
Well,
It's not sesame.
Since it's commonly sesame, but here they don't think
It's not.
sesame.
Yeah, it's not sesame because of the explanation of the Gemara. That can't be. So, anyways, that's what okay. So Amar Le Abai Le Rav Yosef. Bishlam Akidna, I understand the flax. That should be permissible to cut because chazi lechafif, I can use it to cover things, no problem. Kshusa, the hops, that's how we make beer. It's not new. We've been doing it for thousands of years this way. Hops is how you make beer, and chazi l'shechra, fine. Elashum shemi, this type of plant, lemay chazi. What is the value of this plant? So it says the Gemara, chazi lenazie de isbehu. There are some seeds inside that can't be. This is why it can't be. Why it can't be sesame. There are some seeds inside that are beneficial even without waiting for them to dry. Rav Yanai havaleahu pardesa. He had a particular orchard. Demata zimna bechula demoada. He had a very narrow window of harvesting time, and the way the harvesting time fell out was that it was right in the middle of Chol HaMoed, and he was concerned about davar ha'avid. So aktefe, so katfe, he plucked anything that he needed. L'shana, the next year, shehiuha kule alma pardesai l'chul demoad. Everybody watched him, and they saw that, last year he was doing this. He's a chashuv yid Rav Yanai, and everybody copied him. So the next year that it came up, year 3, afkere Rav Yanai the pardesai hushata. He didn't touch it. He let the whole field go to waste, so that people will know that he did not do the right thing the year prior. We'll stop right here, and Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow night, a blot and a half, learning Daf Yud Gimel, and as well Yud Daled Amud Aleph. Please God, please God, please God. And then the next day, Yud Daled Amud Beis and Tezvav, and that will be Tuesday. Is today Monday? It's Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday we'll learn Tez Zayin. Friday we'll learn Yud Zayin, and no Daf Yomi on Shabbos. And that's our week. Wishing you all a beautiful night.